A lot of people that we're talking about in terms of audience don't understand that brand isn't what you say it is. It's what your customer says it is. And what they say it is based on the experiences they have with the brand.
This is Brand Story, a podcast featuring in-depth conversations with leaders, marketers, and brand storytellers about their professional journey and the impact they are making on the world around them. Welcome to the Brand Story podcast. I'm your host, Steve Gilman, and my guest today is Carolyn Walker. Carolyn is the CEO and managing partner of Response, an award-winning independent marketing agency that serves clients like Logitech, McAfee, Netgear, Voodoo, Amazon Web Services, and more. She has extensive experience working with companies on brand building and performance marketing, and co-created the hugely successful Hackable podcast by McAfee, which is in I think the top 1% of podcasts ever produced. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. Very excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you too. I'm so glad our paths crossed and we get to have this conversation. I really think what you all do at Response is pretty impressive, and you do all types of different marketing, but I know you've done a lot of tech, and you're wearing a Logitech headset right now. Aren't they a client?
They are a client, yes. I'm very happy to say we've had Logitech as a client for almost 20 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's kind of beating that norm, right? Or average that for the brand agency relationships is usually, 2.5, 3 years or something like that. And we've had them for almost 20.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. I think there's something about independent agencies that's very different than the big agencies. And I've had different agency leaders all the way from Kristen Cavallo from Martin to Laura Hovlis from FlightView. And we're an independent agency too, and our average client life is 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a much more intimate relationship, right?
It is. Yeah. You kind of go through thick and thin. You're in the trenches together. It's a very one-on-one relationship with leaders. So I think it's just a different feel, and some companies really respond to that, and that's what they want.
Yeah, I'd agree. I started my career at Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising in Manhattan, and at the time, it was one of the largest agencies in the world, and it was a totally different feel and experience. Of course, I wasn't on the client side at that point, but just from being inside the agency, it felt much different than it does leading Response.
Yeah, I bet. It's a lot less personal.
Mm-hmm. Completely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's an expectation in big agencies, whether it's spoken or unspoken, that clients aren't going to be there for very long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is. And I, back then anyway, I think one of the big complaints that we would hear is that the client would get pitched a certain group of people, and then the reality of who's working on their business is quite different, and in the small agency world, you don't have that. We don't have any B or C players on our team. They're all A players, so you kind of, what you see is what you get, Yeah,
I can relate. I mean, I think that's a huge dissatisfier with large agencies and any other kind of large consultancies, is that you talk to the A team, they pitch you, you get excited, and a lot of times you get the B or C team. I've seen clients get frustrated with that over and over and over again. I think your company works with brands, and you're really, trying to break the status quo of how marketing is always done, but you're certainly very versed in brand management. Is there anything about Response that you just really want people to know? Because you guys do a unique mix of work.
Yeah, we do quite a different, lots of different things. But I would say, our line is we help ambitious brands punch above their weight. And so those are the kinds of brands we're looking to work with. Brands who are not satisfied with status quo, right? So that could be a challenger brand. It could be a brand who's leading the pack, but it's those brands who are like, we know we can do more and be more than we currently are today. We love helping brands like that. We don't like the status quo position. We don't like to be conservative. We want brands that embrace creativity, right, and disruption and all those kinds of things. And so those are the kinds of brands that we're looking to work with. And then the punch above your weight side is really, we don't just suggest to our clients, you should do this because this is what we know. That's not what it's about. It's about looking at, comprehensively what's the problem and what are all the possible solutions to the problem, and coming back with really, great creative ideas that drive the result for them. And so that enables them to punch above their weight, right?
Yeah, and I think great independent agencies have the ability to make it difficult on themselves over and over and over again. You're not just finding solutions. You're not pulling stuff off the shelf and doing what you've always done. You're always trying to, quite frankly, punch above your weight. And all independent agencies do that. And that's where I think the real value is. You don't get that institutional mindset. You don't tend to repeat. You tend to do original work. And, there's something that you put on LinkedIn about a stand-up meeting that you had that, it was if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. But if you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone. I love that. I've heard it before, but it was a great reminder. And I kind of feel like that's at the heart of an independent agency. You're not waking up every day thinking about how much money you can make. You're just in the trenches trying to help people succeed.
Yeah, 100%. For me, it was never about the money or, I own an agency. I don't even like the title CEO or owner. I don't like it. It's not who I am and what I'm about. It really is about helping people. And I think it's inherent in who we are as an agency. The money, I think, comes because you do great work and because at your core, you're wanting to help people. And I'll tell you a quick story about that in terms of, not just pulling something off the shelf. McAfee had been a client for about 10 years when we came to them with this idea of Hackable.
I was just about to ask you about that. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, good. I'm a little ahead of you. And so, I had become a huge consumer of podcasts. This was back in, when Serial came out, right? When everybody else became a consumer of podcasting. I was like, what is this? And why are so many people talking about it? And I started listening to Serial, and I could not believe how engaged I was and drawn into the content that I was. And I went from Serial to This American Life to The Moth, I couldn't get enough. I was ingesting everything and became a huge fan and realized the value of having someone, having a content in your ears in such an intimate way, and the theater of the mind that it produced for me was just outstanding. And so, fast forward a couple years, I was on my way to California to visit our clients out there on a plane, and I read an article about how brands were starting to dip their toes into the podcast waters. And my first meeting as I landed was with McAfee, and I thought, wow, as a marketer of security, we had this challenge, which was we knew that the number one thing you can do to defend yourself is to have to be educated about what the threats are, right? But the problem is that, there's so much apathy about that, about using the software, who cares about it? I set it and forget it, so there's apathy about the product, and there's also apathy about even hearing about how do I defend myself. It really is a set it and forget it situation. People don't think about it until what happens, right? They get hacked or, they get their identity stolen.
Difficult to sell prevention, isn't it?
It really, really is really difficult. And we tried all kinds of things over the years, some with varying degrees of success. And I thought, wow, this could be a real opportunity where we can if we do it the right way, we can engage people in the conversation around cybersecurity. And so I landed. I didn't even have a slide or anything, I swear, Steve. Had this meeting with my client, and at the very end, I'm like, should I say anything? Should I not? I don't have anything, but I think it's a really good idea, and it's totally on strategy. And I shared the idea with her, and she loved it. She was like, this is an amazing idea. I want to pursue it. So, have my trip to California. I'm out there for a week. I come back to my team, and I'm like, you guys are not going to believe what I just did. Because to your point earlier, we had never done anything.
Now we got to figure it out.
Exactly. We had never done anything like this before.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about the power of independent agencies. When you have inspiration and inspiration strikes, you have that direct access to the decision makers, and you're able to be at a level with them where there's a trust where you can, communicate inspiration without a polished presentation. You can actually have an exchange of ideas in an honest way. And I think that's the strength of what we do.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's that intimacy of the relationship, right? And knowing someone so well and understanding their business and their problems so well that you can convey it without a slide.
Yeah, we've always felt that we sort of live our clients' brands along with them.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, because you wake up every day and you care. Of course, you care about your brand and you care about what's going on with your company. But I think most days I wake up, I'm thinking about my clients way before I think about me, because I just honestly care about them. That's such an amazing story. So that just blew up too.
It really blew up. And I think, there were a few keys to success there. One is that we made the podcast entertaining first. It wasn't a sales pitch for McAfee. It was really entertaining content. And the format of the show was any hacks that happened in pop culture, like through, say, Black Mirror or Mr. Robot or even the news. Like, we took these hacks that people were exposed to in pop culture, we recreated them in the audio format, and then we put them to test, right, with our host, Jeff Siskind, who was the rube in the situation, and White Hat Hackers. And we said, should you really be nervous about this or not? And then at the end, we gave them some tips and tricks. And it's just, if you listen to a show or two, you'll know what I mean. It's like very engaging and very entertaining. So I think that was one.
Yeah, they are. As a matter of fact, I've been a fan of that podcast years ago and still. And, it was a great program. And I think it had all the right ingredients that people seem to miss in podcasting. It's about storytelling. It's about engagement. And man, I don't know about you. How many podcasts have you listened to, especially business podcasts, where the value proposition just keeps getting stuffed down your throat?
Oh, it's horrible.
Just below the surface of every single thing. And it's like, even when we started this, I just want to tell people stories and meet cool people that I admire. I'm not trying to sell anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's too much when it's two talking heads that are really just trying to pitch the business.
Yeah.
No one's going to listen.
No, it's kind of gross, actually. So congratulations on that. I think that's just absolutely amazing accomplishment, because you were very early to the game. And I think it set some really good examples, too. I mean,
definitely.
It was a really powerful one out there, at the outset for business podcasting. It was one of the best.
Yeah. Thank you.
Being audience-centric, it seems like people talk about it a lot, but it always amazes me how many brands don't do it.
It's incredible, right?
It's just mind-boggling to me. People fall in love with their own features and benefits and just kind of yell them at you, and it just doesn't work.
Absolutely the wrong thing to do. And actually, I heard you talk about Liquid Death, and that is an example of a brand that really knows their audience, right?
Yeah, I'm such a fan.
Huge fan too. We've been talking about them since they launched internally in our agency, because they've done such a great job at branding.
The laser focus they have on their brand is something any of us can learn from. But also other brands can take a page out of that book pretty easily. So let's talk about brand building a little bit. And I've seen you talk about and seen you write about how that foundation of knowing who your audience is and really knowing how to speak to them and being focused on that helps set the foundation for brands. And you've helped a lot of brands. Can you talk a little bit about brand building and your point of view on it?
Yeah, well, I think thinking about brand first is huge. And I think even we get, a lot of clients come to us that maybe don't understand, totally brand or have complete clarity about their brand. And so that's where we come in and help. And, I do think there's many things that are very foundational to building brand. And, one is understanding what brand is and isn't, right? And I think one of the big things that a lot of people that we're talking about in terms of audience don't understand, that brand isn't what you say it is. It's what your customer says it is. And what they say it is based on the experiences they have with the brand, right? And so you better make sure as the company, as the brand, that you are properly thinking about every single touch point that you have and making those experiences what you want them to be from a customer perspective to influence what they think about the brand, right? Because ultimately it is, your brand is what they think it is, not what you think it is.
And man, when you leave experience, as an afterthought or as customer service or explaining and making sure everyone in the organization is on the same page about what the brand stands for, it's destined to fail. And it happens
100%.
over and over again. I mean, not to bash Best Buy, but it's my favorite example of a disconnect between what someone says and what you experience. Like you go in and you get treated terribly because they don't connect the dots. And I think that frontline experience, I mean, I love hearing that. I think you and I could probably talk about this all day. Is that, it is 100% about the experience, and the consumers decide who you are and what you mean. You don't get to tell them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're talking about in a retail environment, right, where you do have frontline workers who are interacting on a daily, a minute by minute, day by day basis with your customers. Like we have a blog post about the forgotten ones in the restaurant industry, but it's the same thing in what you're talking about in Best Buy. Like, you cannot forget about those thousands of people who are your employees, who are touching your guest, your customer. They need to be advocates and stewards of the brand to give that customer a great experience. And so many brands overlook that.
Yeah, especially when they're consumer facing and they're actually the touch point, and the way you treat them is 100% how they're going to treat your customers.
Absolutely. I think Maya Angelou says something about that. Like,
Yeah.
right? The thing that people won't forget is how you treat them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Right.
like you can do the best brand campaign, you can know what your why is, you can put out the best marketing, and then if someone interacts with your front line and gets treated badly, that's all they're ever going to remember. And guess what? That's who you are now.
It is who you are. And guess what's going to happen nowadays, right? They're going to tell everyone else about it too, right?
Yeah.
The first thing they're going to do is post it to social, send a group chat or whatever.
So yeah, it amazes me the effort that'll go into talking about a brand, talking about itself, and there's an unequal effort to actually train and take care of and communicate with the frontline employees. So it happens again and again, and it's like, the money and the effort needs to go to both places. You can't, and the maddening thing about brand is you can't just do one of them. No,
absolutely. You have to look at every single, the whole 360-degree view, right? Well, where am I touching all these people? What am I doing? Does my website marry up with my in-store experience? If my in-store experience is great and my web experience sucks, it's a problem.
We could just talk about this all day. And so there's something that you talk about and I know you care about that I think is so interesting because it gets misinterpreted a lot of times, is when people are trying to apply performance marketing measurement to brand and the difference. And I know you all do both. You're talking about brand building. I work in brand building, but you also work in performance marketing. But I feel like on the client side, sometimes as soon as someone gets a little performance marketing success, they think that those metrics are going to apply to brand.
Yeah, I mean, the metrics clearly don't apply to brand. I think what's happened in the last 10 years, I would say, is that brands have, it's like being on have you ever been on a whale watching ship?
No, but okay,
trip?
I love this analogy.
And it's like you go out on the boat and there's a whale on the left and the whole boat scrambles over to the left-hand side, the thing tilts over and you're like, "Meh." And then,
Right.
There was a whale on the right and you go to the right. And I feel like digital marketing has done that to the world of marketers and brands, is that it was the thing that everyone leaned into. And not to say that that's wrong. I do think that digital marketing, plays a huge role in building brand, but it was like the shiny object that became the thing that everyone invested in because of the availability of metrics, right? And the ease of getting the metrics and last click attribution and all of that. And so, it felt more proven that you can invest in an SEM campaign and you see that, you get so many clicks and you get so many purchases and we don't need to do anything else. All we have to do is put all of our budget into digital and performance and we're done, right? Like, we'll grow the business. Well, what's happened 10, 15 years later is that they're seeing that, the research shows that if you're only or mostly focused on performance marketing, you're eroding the brand because you're not building brand and your base sales are going away, essentially. And so it's a big problem and it's a big conversation that is happening now. And I think that, listen, I don't think that it's not a contest between brand and performance. And I'm not saying that brand building can't drive performance. I'm not saying performance has no impact on brand at all. I think that, brand does it really, really good brand marketing does drive performance. And I think that you need to think about how you use performance that to align to brand, right? Instead of eroding it. And so right now, I think, the big issue is that there's an imbalance in budget between brand and performance, and it's way too tilted towards performance. And I think we're starting to see it come back. And I think at some point, it will come back where performance is maybe where it should be. I mean, Les Binet and Peter Fields, based on all of their research, say that performance should be about 26% of your budget and the rest in brand in the B2C world.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And in the B2B world, it is a little more equal. It's a little more 50-50. But the fact of the matter is that in all the brands that I'm working on, or a lot of the brands that I'm working on, that's not the case. And so it's a challenge to convince the CFOs of the world, right, that the right thing to do is invest in brand.
Yeah, because the data, it's almost like it's a little bit like instant gratification. You can see, they love the data, someone purchased. But, it's a short-term game sometimes.
It is a short-term game. And to prove the brand side, it takes time. It's 6 months or more of investing in brand before you can actually see the results, because the tracking isn't instantaneous like that, nor does behavior change that fast. And also, brand building really is about talking to the audience that's not in market today.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about creating those relationships.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly right. It's about education and awareness and love, building the love so that when they are in market, you get them.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Yeah, man. We need to do an episode about just this, because this is something we talk a lot about. And, the clients that we have that do have it more in balance are more sustainable and more successful over time.
100%. I'm not surprised by that. Yeah.
No, I'm not either. And it's amazing to see. There's absolutely nothing wrong with performance marketing. It is a powerful tool, but it is just a tool. It's not the ultimate answer. And then what happens is it gets talked about or at least it used to, not as much now because I do think it's turning. It got talked about like it was the end all and be all and it would just kill everything else. Well, yeah, if you're selling a widget online and it's an interchangeable widget at that moment, yes, that was exactly the thing to do. But in the long term, for any kind of consumer brand in the world we live in today, the perception and the relationship, it's so emotional the way people buy. And there's nothing emotional about performance marketing.
Yeah, no, there isn't. It's about, it's about what you're doing. Like, Simon Sinek talks about it, right? It's like the how, the why, and the what. And it's about you focus on the what and who. Okay, that might work, like just to get them to convert that to one time they're in market. But after that, you're in a trouble,
Yeah, it doesn't create loyalty. It doesn't get them to come back. They're just going to click on something else the next time.
One thing I will say, Steve, about building brand and going back to liquid death, mm-hmm. because they've been such a, it's a commodity. Water is a commodity.
Yeah.
Like, let's face it, right?
They've done it's brilliant.
Brilliant job. And, when you do branding right, your brand is worth something and it drives your enterprise value up, right? And so I just read that Liquid Death is valued at $700 million. Their sales are $150 million. So I would argue that a huge chunk of that difference between $150 and $700 million is their brand value. And that should perk up the ears of every CFO on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, that is where the value is. And the big, the truly successful brands understand that. When you get to a certain level sometimes, whether it's CFOs or CEOs, they really start to understand the power of brand. And the companies we all hold up and use as example are usually the ones that are getting it. The Mints of the world,
mm-hmm.
the Liquid
Apples,
Deaths,
the Nikes, right?
Apples, the Nikes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
get it.
Boy, does Nike get that. So yeah, I think that's why I love the Liquid Death example, and I just love how laser focused they are on their audience and how their philosophy of like, if it's a bad idea, let's go do it. For creative, that's just so much fun and it fits them so perfectly. And I like that it's unique to them. It's not, not just anyone could do it with any brand. You have to figure out what's unique to you. You can't just do what the other guy's doing.
Exactly. Yeah. They become very differentiated by their unique ideas, and how they market themselves. Like their differentiation really is marketing.
That is 100% what it is. And I think that's so cool. So let me ask you a couple questions about you, because you're an accidental entrepreneur. You got into this. You're very successful. You guys have tons of accolades and awards, and I love your work. What's a surprising thing that you've learned about leadership? Something that you really didn't expect? Because I don't think you jumped into this to be a CEO.
I didn't. And, I feel like leadership is so many things. And like I said, I didn't set out to be an agency owner. But I think leadership is really, for me, about a lot of it is about listening and learning and knowing that I don't know it all. I don't. I'm constantly trying to educate myself about what it is to be a good leader. And I've learned so much about having empathy and it's to the people who work for me and understanding the people that work for us. And we recently became workplace, we went through a workplace enlightenment certification through the 4As. And that was completely eye-opening, made me think about things that I would never have thought about before. Or, you don't think that you have bias, but in reality, you really do, And so it's just being aware of that stuff. And so, I think that, we've had a really amazing experience with our team, and we have a lot of team members who have stayed with us for a really long time. And I've been told that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And so, having people who stay with us this long makes me feel like we are doing something right as an organization and the culture. And by the way, my business partner, David Kleinberg, has really been influential on the culture of our organization. And I just feel like as a leader, being like open to that, the ideas and stuff that have been brought forth to create that and to allow that to happen was a big lesson for me.
Yeah. And, I like what you called out about empathy and listening because, there's sort of the old model that people thought and got taught by bad example. Maybe you had a leader that acted like a boss, quote unquote, that sort of like authority trip thing that leaders get on, thinking they should have all the answers. And, I think it's just a very human endeavor. I think the better you can listen to people, the better you can have a sense of what people are going through and be there for them when they need you. That, it's not a transaction. You don't use people as a business. You're there to support them in their lives. And if you can do that honestly, your brand's going to be more successful. It's a little like what we talked about frontline people, but I think it goes even beyond that when you're an organization that's built to help others. So an independent agency, we're here for our clients. We're going to get in the trenches and try to figure something out for them. Sometimes it's urgent. Well, if we're not taking care of ourselves and each other, we're not going to be very good at that, are we?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, I think you said it really nicely. We are in this together. We rely on each other. We trust each other. We treat each other with respect. Like those are all the things that you need in order to be in a service business, number one, and give a good product to your client, number two.
What event in your career has shaped you the most as a person, or as a professional? What do you think really got you to who you are today?
Well, that's a good question. I think what shaped me as a professional probably goes back to my Northeastern days and having those amazing experiences with the brands that I work with back in college. Like I can honestly say I would not be where I am without that, both that education and the experiences that I got with them. They really set me on my path. Incredibly grateful for that and incredibly grateful to my parents for paying for me to go to Northeastern and get the education and experience that I got. And then I think shaping me as a person, I think nothing can compare to the experience that I got am getting at Response. Like I have changed so much by being part of Response. in the things that you're talking about. Like, I'm way more empathetic than I've ever been in my whole entire life. I'm way more collaborative than I've ever been in my whole entire life. I'm living in way more joy than I've ever had in my whole entire life. So, I just couldn't trade that for anything. And maybe that part of that is just getting older too. I don't know, but I think it's getting older in the right environment, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear. I mean, I always love when I talk to people who are in the right place and, having a great experience in their careers. And it is very personal. Our work and our life are inexorably linked. So where you are and the people you're with and how you experience that every day has a huge impact on, how you develop as a human being and your daily experience and what you can bring to others. So what would you name, you're doing some really cool things. I know you're out there on podcasts, and I'm so happy you joined me today. I'm having a blast talking with you. And what would you name this chapter of your life right now?
So that's a good question. I would call it the sponge, and meaning that I continue to learn so much. I was just in Arizona with the Jade Forum, and, we're talking about agency growth and positioning and M&A and talent issues and all this. Like, I'm a sponge. I'm learning everything I can from them. I'm learning so much about entrepreneurship. I continue to learn more about branding. I am just soaking it in and applying it to the clients that I work with. Like I mentioned before, I've learned so much about DE&I, not only for ourselves, but we actually helped Carrier launch a DE&I brand internally. Brand valuation, just all these things are, I'm just soaking it in, and learning as much as I can and applying as much of it as I can. So I would call this chapter of my life the sponge.
I love that. That is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, and the movement for DE&I and the people starting to truly respond to that and stand up programs in corporations we need that. Let me ask you one final question. I mean, we could talk all afternoon, but I know you probably have a few things to do. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
I would say, I would, to my younger self, I would say, really appreciate the experiences that you're getting. I completely undervalued the experiences that I got at Saatchi, and I undervalued the experiences that I was getting at Dart. And I just didn't know. I was so young, I didn't realize how much I was being exposed to and how much they taught me. And, I'm certainly very, very thankful for all of that because, again, I was able to apply all of that to going forward to these smaller companies and businesses. But I just feel like I didn't really know exactly, how fortunate I was at the moment. And I think related to that is that every decision matters. Like, you can make a decision to go to a company and move to another, state and it changes your life. Can literally change your course of your whole life. And it certainly did for me. And so, I would say every decision matters.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end because I love that sentiment and I love it as it applies to us as people and it applies to brands. Every decision matters and every touch point matters. It's like, I always loved the saying, you can do whatever you want, but everything matters. For brands. Like, you can act however you want. Sure, go ahead. But every single thing you do is going to matter.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you've got to think about all of it and make sure you're doing the right thing every step of the way. For sure.
You and for your customers and for your clients. So thank you so much for your time today. This was so wonderful. I had a great time talking to you.
Likewise, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.